I'm going to go ahead and call to order the April meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors. Thank you all for being here tonight. Ask our board secretary to call the roll.
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair O'Connell. Ravish Gudger. Matt Harris.
Present.
Praveen Kavpal.
Here.
Hillary Orr. Here. Kirsten Phelps.
Here.
Kevin Greenleaf. Ajaysha Thomas.
Present.
Arthur Wicks.
Here.
Jamal Shobi.
Present.
Chair Kaplan, you have a quorum. Those absent are Vice Chair O'Connell, Ravish Gudger, Kevin Greenleaf.
Thank you, Secretary. Our first order of business tonight is well, actually, it says welcome and introductions. I was going to wait until Chair's report, but we have a new face around the table, so we'll go ahead and ask Jamal to introduce himself. We welcome you to the meeting. Those who weren't at the stockholders meeting didn't get to hear Jamal's background. He and I got to spend a lot of time together at the stockholders meeting because we also rode the bus back together, so we had a 30-minute ride afterwards, and really impressed with your background. Please tell us a little bit about your professional career, how you came to Alexandria, and what you hope to get out of Stevens.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, I'm Jamal Scobie. I'm a senior program manager with the Transportation Research Board. I manage the Transit Cooperative Research Program Synthesis Practice. Hopefully, everyone's in the transit industry has read some of the TRB, TCRP research reports. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, worked for both public transit agencies in Boston and Houston. And on the consultant side, I worked for Foursquare, KFH Group. My background is strategically a strategic planner and researcher. I've been in the city of Alexandria, I think a little bit over 2 years. And I just look to leverage my public transit expertise and my working with the Transportation Research Board as I do research across the country on emerging technologies, workforce development, and apply that knowledge to the board here at ATC. Look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. Well, we're delighted to have you. We do an annual icebreaker exercise. Usually we do it in the spring, but this year we'll probably do it in the fall. So you'll have a chance there'll be a prompt, and then we all kind of talk about some experience that we've had in Alexandria or a favorite place or something we want to try. And we learn a little bit about each other and kind of what we do when we're not sitting around the table. So thank you. Welcome to the board. Our first order of business tonight is the hearing on the Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan. I'm going to ask our staff if they have a presentation or if want to dive into speakers.
I don't think we have. Did you want to say anything about it at this point? You don't have to. You're good.
So for those attending either in person or electronically, we normally have a open mic public comment at the beginning of every meeting, but when we have a public hearing, this is the only public comment period. And so if you were planning to speak during open mic, we're going to ask you to talk during the public hearing, because the hearing is about the Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan, which is basically all about kind of what Dash does, the service that we're going to have on the road, and how we're going to meet those needs. So anything that you have to say about Dash would fit very well under that public hearing. So I'm going to ask our board secretary if we have anybody registered.
We do not.
We do not. So we'll ask if there's anybody in the room who would like to speak. Raise your hand. We'll now ask if there's anybody participating via Zoom. There's the raise hand feature. We'll pause and give you a moment to seek recognition.
No hands going up.
All right. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. But I do want to say, despite not having any speakers tonight, I know that our staff has been doing a lot of work out in the community to educate us about both services and changes that we have staggered throughout those we have left from the 2022 version of the plan, and future changes that we're looking to get support from council to make. And so we have gotten some very good engagement, and we've been doing a lot of events, and even things that are a little more unconventional, getting out to meet riders and community members where they're at, instead of hosting public meetings like this. So look forward to hearing more about that as we approve the ATSP later this spring. All right, so we don't have a separate public comment. We're going to move into the chair's report. I'm going to recap the stockholders meeting, which was held at the second legislative meeting in March. Just curious, how many of you were able to watch the meeting? Or I know Ajaysha was there with me. And Jamal, of course, was there. The rest of you didn't have a chance to watch. Okay. It was a very successful meeting overall. I went into the meeting with two objectives. One was to gauge council's interest in having another work session. We had a really successful one this past September, and the mayor polled the members of council, and the agreement was yes, we're gonna have a work session. We will find out soon what the date's going to be for that. The council members will drive the agenda items for the session, and that will probably come through feedback from the city manager's office and our staff to prepare for it. So information about that. I had suggested, and I think this will be one of the topics, that we look at the update to the ATV, the new Dash network, which was done in 2019. A lot has changed in the city. And so Stevie and Camilla and others are working very hard on what the next iteration of that's going to look like and how to kick off the public engagement portion of that. So I think that will be a good time to get the input of our council members as we're starting to shape that. And so, but we will have other topics as well. The second objective was we'd had a discussion after the Winter Storm Fern about the condition of transit stops and the challenges that riders had in the community of using transit during that. And so Josh had shared a statistic with us that 9 days after the storm, only 20% of our stops were accessible for members of the community, not having to then stand the road, being able to get over a curb. So I presented that statistic to council along with some kudos that Josh had shared with the WMATA board about their efforts to help us clean our stops. We got to 20% because WMATA did 46 stops and also have other stops that they're responsible for, such as those in front of metro stations. So I think the council paid attention to that, and they heard that there were concerns about the conditions of bus stops and a lot of interest in exploring what we might do differently in a future storm, as well as a broader conversation about bus stop maintenance overall, which right now is entirely the responsibility of the city. There was a budget question that even before our stockholders meeting, the mayor had put in about what it would look like if Dash were to take over bus stop maintenance. And I was able to preview kind of what our response was going to be, because the question was still in the works. Actually, as of this Monday, it was still in the works. I don't know if it's been, I didn't check to see if it had gone forward yet. But basically that we would need to have a broader conversation, because the city has a lot of data that Dash would need to review and sort of understand kind of the current lay of the land, and to then see what sort of resources would be necessary if this were transition. And that may not be the best approach, but I'm really glad that there's a lot of interest in looking at a process that I think has been in place for a long, long time, and to see, can we do it better? Because I moved here 22 years ago, and we have, at least on Dash, more than double the number of riders that we had 22 years ago. And so we have a lot more people using our stops and using our infrastructure. And so I'm really glad that there's interest in that. So I think that will also be part of the work session, because we'll know a lot more kind of to be able to get council's input on that. So that went really, really well. There was one surprise during the meeting, and that's why I was curious how many of you had watched, because if you didn't watch, you probably aren't aware of this. We had a no vote on our board slate that came from Councilman Chapman. He had not said anything to me before the meeting, and he did not speak during the meeting about his no vote on the board slate. So I am left to infer that that was a sign that one or more of us do not, in his opinion, reflect the priorities that he sees for the role that a board member should have. I plan to talk with him, but I wanted to talk with all of you first. One, because I think you all should know about this if you weren't there. Councilman Aguirre recused from the vote, so it was a 4-1 vote in favor of the board slate. But I sort of, as I was sitting at the table, because this happens, if you've been to one of our stockholders meetings, this happens very early during our meeting. And so I was expecting that there was going to be comment or engagement about it, and I was starting to prepare of where might this go and how might I respond to it. And I was thinking about, as stockholders, take away the fact that they're also council members and so have a lot of control over Dash. But as stockholders, they do one thing. They appoint the board of directors, and we act in their interests to ensure that we are governing the system in kind of a fiduciary way that respects their role, respects their priorities, and they appoint us to kind of act as their agents. The way we do the board slate, we send everybody up as one group. And they can either vote for everybody, they can vote against everybody, or they can abstain from the vote. It doesn't give us a lot of feedback, and that's why I'm trying to understand where Councilman Chapman was coming from, because, are you upset with everybody? Are you okay with everybody? Maybe there are council members at many stockholders meetings who have said, I don't really like this person, I don't really like that person, but it's not a big enough deal, or I don't want to vote against everybody else, and so I'm going to support the board. Because we need to, as part of the governance of the system, to evaluate ourselves and evaluate our own effectiveness. So here's my thought for how we do things in the future. We would still, the bylaws are very clear that we nominate the slate of directors and send that up. And so we would still nominate a slate and we would send a slate. And the intention would be that we would still be approved as a group. And I think in most years we would be. But the presiding officer of the meeting, which is the chair of the board, would ask the stockholders before we vote, are there any board nominees that you want to remove from the slate and have an individual vote on? And so let's say it's me, let's say your person next to me, so let's say it's me and Matt.
Probably was me anyway.
I don't know.
No, I like John. I like
So,
John. John, I no disrespect. I like John and his wife.
Coming up in minutes, right? Let's say it's me and Matt. So the rest of you are on the slate, and then council would vote on the slate, minus me and Matt. We'd have a vote on me, and we'd have a vote on Matt. And so if a stockholder wants to go on record and say, I don't think this person fits my priorities or should be on this board, they have the choice whether to do that. Because I'm thinking about, for every other board and commission, council gets to vote individually on everybody who's there based on the applicants that are there, and there's a record, and that's something that the community can consider as to, I elect council members. Does that, how they vote on appointees, may be something that would influence how I vote, and they should have the right to do that for us individually. And the second piece is just from a corporate standpoint. The corporate boards, act very much as we do, sending up a slate of nominees. But, if you own stock in a corporation, you get a proxy. It says you can vote for all, you can withhold your vote for all, you can abstain, or you can say, I want to vote individually. And you can go through that proxy and vote yay or nay on each board member. And so this would just be consistent with that. Now, for our 3 city staff members, I discovered something else while I was going through the bylaws, which is that the city manager is the sole appointing authority for the 3 of you. And so that's why if your seat changes mid-year, for example, Kevin came in when Laura left, we didn't have to go to the stockholders right away and say, can we see Kevin? The city manager can name that person. And there are 2 of the positions are the person who serves in this position with the city or that person's designee. And then in the case of Art, is the city manager can appoint any city staff member as his 3rd appointee. So I want to take the 3 of you out of the slate. You guys are we will send it up as information. The council doesn't have to vote on you because they can go to the city manager and say, we remove you, that we don't want this person here or we like this person. But they are only voting based on our bylaws on this resident rider members. So those would be the 2 changes that we would make for next year. And I'd like to, because I'm going to reach out to Councilman Chapman, I want to just mention that to him as something that we're going to offer. And then I think before the stockholders meeting, we would send them a letter just explaining to council members as stockholders why we're making this change. And it's really to give them appropriate control over this board. I don't know how this started. It probably goes back to 1984. It was a 5-member board when Dash was created. So it was probably just, if they had a problem with a board member, they probably just went to the chair and it was dealt with before it got to the stockholders meeting. And stockholders meetings were short. And so they probably just said, we don't want to take 8 individual votes. And I hope we don't take 8 individual votes. But I think that if they truly have something that they want to say to us, we need to. Thoughts?
We should also have a mechanism where we can get their feedback as well beforehand, because who knows, maybe it was something, whoever it was, whatever made John upset, that was inadvertent by one of the members. But the feedback, it should be a 2-way street so we can get an idea of where they're going. Right now, thankfully we're in a line, but sometimes we may be just guessing with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, that mechanism has to go both ways, I think.
I agree. And we've spent a lot of time on this because, I think it's the first time this has happened in Dash's history, but I also don't want to make too big a point of it. I think he would have addressed it if he had something he wanted to say. And I think, he, in choosing not to, it must not have been that big a point, but, it does, when you look at other ways to make improvement, this may be something we need to do. And I agree with you, Matt, that, and that's something I think we would share with them, that we want to have an open dialogue with them and encourage them to come talk to, me as the board chair if there are governance issues that we need to address before we get to an open meeting.
All that is incredibly thoughtful, David, and I think I generally agree with all the broad strokes. I think my reaction is a little bit like, I don't actually think it's necessary to have, I think presume the vote would be unanimous. I think it's preferable, but not necessary, right? Like I think John voted the way he did based on whatever he's feeling. I think your initial remedy that we should follow up with him and see what's on his mind. That's absolutely the best way to approach it. Let's hear his feedback. I reached out to some people that used to serve in the dashboard. They actually were under the impression that this has happened periodically. And they specifically cited an instance where John had previously voted against another slate. I think Kanik may have voted against a slate at some point along the way. There wasn't total recollection of this, but it was presented to me as like not common, but not like totally unusual. So all this is to say, I do think it's worth considering everything that you're proposing around changing the governance, because I think those are steps that you're discussing that are just really good, smart governance. I also think it's not necessary to overcorrect when we sort of have a relatively small sample size, and it might just be worth engaging in dialogue. Actually, I think, Matt, your point about like maybe the best mechanism is to sort of like share the slate in advance for feedback, reactions, or thoughts, and then kind of like, have that dialogue ahead of time before it does go for a vote. I think what I want to avoid is a circumstance where we are setting the stockholders up to say like, I won't vote for anyone unless it is this person that I have selected and you are not including them, right? I want to be cautious that we don't create a mechanism that actually inappropriately puts too much directive control with the stockholders when that's not really how the system is currently designed to be set up. So I guess so my high level reflection is like, I think all this is really great. We should look at it. We should be thoughtful about it. I'm also not rushing to overreact to something that could be relatively straightforward.
I agree with Jessica's, caveat 100%. I think the important thing also is if a council member has a really strong position, argue to the rest of the council your position and let them tank it. But to call out one of us and put the spotlight on one of us unnecessarily, I think does make a bigger issue out of this.
Well, and let's say, two things. Well, I think I know what you're referring to. I've been on the board since before Councilman Chapman was on city council. So in 2020, and I think Matt and I are the only ones left from that, there was a concern we were bringing forward a board slate was entirely men. And we had two new candidates in there who weren't on the board anymore, but were excellent choices. And it was raised by a couple of council members. I believe John was one of them. I believe Mo Seffelton was the other one who said, I don't want, because they were looking at our board as a whole, that I don't want to seat a board that's entirely male. Now at the time, Elizabeth Bennett Parker was concerned too, although I don't think she was necessarily in the meeting willing to vote no. I think she had raised concerns. But at any rate, there actually were other traffic and parking board at the time actually was all male. I didn't know that at the meeting, or else I would have mentioned that. But we are looked at holistically instead of onesies, twosies. So they did not end up voting against the slate. There was an amendment to the board that actually increased our size. That's why we're between 9 and 11. And so everybody then agreed to vote for the board. But I also was thinking if that, because I did think back to that, because I was the chair, and that was a challenging meeting to go through. That would have allowed them, if they had wanted to seat the rest of the board, but not seat the two new applicants if they had wanted to, if we were allowing individual votes. But because we couldn't break the slate, that actually may have caused issues for everybody. And I think the whole other board would just been a holdover until they figured that out. It was also the last legislative meeting, I think, before COVID started. So I'm sure that would have been top of their minds to deal with in March of 2020 is figuring out the dashboard. But we were able to avoid that, thankfully. Actually, Justin Wilson had proposed the amendment that we still governs our board size. And I think to the other point about about council kind of been directing you to appoint someone. So they can't make a motion they can vote against somebody and that person not be reappointed if the majority of council votes against them, but they can't tell us. They can't substitute somebody there. We would have to go out, recruit, and bring someone back. If they rejected somebody, would I want to know their feedback? Would I want to know who they're looking for? Absolutely. And I would think that we would have to take that into consideration. If a majority of one council member votes against one person, that person continues to serve. I, as chair, for example, got 2 votes or 3 votes against. I wouldn't want to be the chair anymore. I might be able to continue serving on the board because I got a majority, but I think that would be important feedback. I would want to know, am I the right person to be liaisoning with our stockholders? So that was sort of some of the intention of that. I think Praveen has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, David. I wanted to also agree with what Jesse said about not overcorrecting or not oversteering based on one incident without feedback yet. We definitely should get feedback, but if we are making changes, I think it's worth doing a little bit of a look at what are some of the best practices in terms of governance of these types of boards, whether that's within the city or around transit, and maybe our general counsel could help us with that because like the council appointees to the library board are 2 years. Alex Renew is 4 years staggered. There are other solutions that can sort of get you to the same benefit that you were describing some changes toward. If you kind of look more broadly at the set of tools available. So, again, it's like let's not make a hasty change, but if we are going to make a change, let's do it thoughtfully.
I appreciate that, and I mean that is one option. And if we went to kind of staggered terms, or we got rid of the appointments as part of the stockholders meeting, that would be that would. I was trying to, in my proposal, to kind of avoid making really large changes, and that could be appropriate, but that would be a bigger impact, and would also then involve the clerk's office and other parties that handle the boards and commissions. I did ask Josh when we had our pre-board call. I said, because there are 3 sister systems that are set up the way we are: Roanoke, Lynchburg, and Richmond. And Josh was the general manager of Lynchburg before he came here. So I said, how did they appoint their board members? And he said that they were not appointed at the stockholders meeting. They served staggered terms, and they had term limits. They could only serve up to 6 years. Josh dealt with a lot of turnover on his board that we don't have here. And I'm trying to kind of avoid going in that direction, because that would be, I think, a big change to our board. But that is how Lynchburg dealt with it. They did not cover that at the stockholders meeting. So I appreciate. I think based on what I'm hearing, I'm going to reach out to Councilman Chapman, just to encourage a conversation, and to say to him that we are considering some potential changes to our board slate, and be happy to talk with you, about how, not our boards, about how we appoint how we elect our board slate at the stockholders meeting, and happy to talk with you and get your feedback on it. Maybe that's not something he even thinks we need to do. He just wanted to have his say at that meeting and move on. So I appreciate that. I'll leave it very general and see if he wants to have a larger conversation with us. Thank you for walking through that with me. We also need to form a nominating committee. So this is something our bylaws call for. After each stockholder meeting, we start anew and we elect officers of the board and the corporation. We make this is Matt volunteering? I think Matt's volunteering to be on the nominating committee. It's typically a 2-member committee. It's not that heavy a lift because the officers of the corporation are people who encumber positions. So you're picking a chair and a vice chair nominee for the board. That would then be the slate to be brought forward usually at the May meeting. And that those people would take office after the June meeting. So we have a second person.
Go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were holding your cookie up, but.
Oh, I was also raising my hand, but I didn't know. Sometimes you like to have a staff person.
Rish and I are sort of attached to this thing.
Yeah,
Just leave me
by all
alone.
means. Nobody raised their hand, so I raised my hand, but if Arish wants to do it.
I think what you're saying about having a staff person on makes sense too, so.
It's so easy. I mean,
Yeah,
there's.
I think we've
Yeah.
done.
It's sort of, we can do it right now.
Thank you for your volunteer. That's what I have in my report. I'll turn it over to Hillary for the team. Yes.
Go better, my cookie too. Okay, hi everyone. Sorry I missed the last meeting. Nice to see you all. It's been a little while. I have really quick updates this month. Just highlighting a couple of the kind of meetings that we have in the city. We have our Transportation Planning Board regional meeting. At this last meeting, we were kind of looking at progress across the region when it comes to bus priority and electrification. We had conversations about DMV moves and focusing on improvements with speed, bus speeds, coordination, and how we're measuring performance. And then really for Alexandria, this is an important committee because it's helping us stay aligned with other projects happening in the region. And particularly in Vision Route 7, we've been pretty heavily involved in the planning for that with MBTC. So it's just really bringing us all together. another opportunity to bring us all together outside of MBTA, MBTC, DMV moves, and all the other regional planning activities that we do. There was also a WMATA Board of Directors meeting in March. Really, I think the big takeaway here is that we are still waiting to hear from the state on funding and what they're going to do for us. You know, I think regional funding and coordination are critical to keeping the system reliable. It's a big chunk of money for the city, and so we will see when the General Assembly comes back into session on the 21st or 23rd, maybe, if they are going to do anything in the budget that will help support Northern Virginia, our transit. No, I also put some graphics in. I think I threw the graphics in, maybe I didn't. The Braddock Road Metro Rail Station project was submitted to the city. WMATA looking to redevelop that site and focus on more of a multimodal hub. Right now we have kind of the bus loop, kiss and ride. It's a big parking lot. So really focused on creating housing that's right at our metro, which is exactly where we want it to be, and making it more people focused and less auto dominated. So there'll be a lot of work and planning throughout the process with the city, but I think that proposed development meets a lot of the goals that we're working on, and I think it'll be a much nicer use of that space than a parking lot is. So we will keep, let's see, I think I have some dates in here. I believe it'll be over the next 2 years that we'll be refining the design. So we certainly have some time on that one.
I guess I was going to ask two things. One, on the WMATA Board of Directors, that's great on the update that it takes some of the pressure off the city in terms of the subsidy increases. So I hope, as next year as we craft our budget letter, I hope, if there are suggestions that kind of staff and the regional bodies are looking at to kind of help WMATA long-term sustainably reduce their subsidy growth, that we can kind of, review those and consider including them in the letter that we do in January. But very, very happy to hear that there have been some solutions to take pressure off, because I know our city, and I'm sure every jurisdiction in the WMATA complex, dealing with challenges. And then on the Braddock Road Metro Rail Station project, I agree with, I think it's really, really exciting, a long overdue. But as one, because WMATA I know is going through a public engagement process now, are there things that, as the city has looked at the project with their kind of interim solution, that you think would be helpful for people to kind of raise for them to kind of keep in mind as they're planning this project, so that it is very successful and can accommodate the changes to the buses and circulation within the station?
Yeah, I mean, staff will dive into the details once we see them. Right now, it's really, really high level. I'm sure there's going to be comments on placement of different things. But certainly as we move forward, I can keep you all updated where you need to pay attention. But the concept is so high level right now that there's not, I wouldn't say at this point there's a lot to weigh in on.
Okay, so things like even figuring out, how is West Street going to be configured? Where will the crossings be? That's all to come.
I know with our Braddock Road City project, we had looked at some different designs of West Street that we thought could help with safety and moving people and cars and buses. And so we did share those with WMATA staff, but it's still very early right now.
Other questions? All right, Josh, you have some special recognition.
Yes, I did leave the Dash Rider Advisory Committee up there in case anybody came to say anything, but they did not. So
we'll be here in June. We're going to have it.
I'll be here in June for sure. So I'd like to ask and Al-Mustafa to join me up here podium, so you can see who these guys are. Don't be shy. Come on up here. They may have seen you before, but so Shana and Al-Mustafa work in our maintenance department, and these guys, you probably don't also know about this, stepped up during an emergency in December involving one of our buses, and they were submitted as a part of a recognition program through the Virginia Transit Liability Pool, which is our insurance pool, and covers our risk coverage. And they were selected, rightfully so, as they should have been nominated. And I just want to summarize what they did. I mean, they stepped up in last December. A bus returned to the lot with an active fire originating from the right rear wheel and brake assembly. Mustafa and Shah responded immediately, recognizing the seriousness of the situation and acted quickly. There's actually a photo there. I don't know who got the photo, but I'm impressed. And worked together to extinguish the fire before it could escalate. And if you don't know this, when a bus catches fire, it is very hard to control very quickly. It gets out of control very quickly, and it can be a total loss. So because of their calm actions and teamwork and strong commitment to safety, they helped to protect Dash and the Dash facility and reduce risk to the others nearby. And their response reflected exactly what it means to go above and beyond, and in my opinion, exemplify the Dash difference. So I'm honored to recognize you guys. Thank you for coming in. You look great. You're not in your maintenance uniforms. You look really sharp. You know, but thank you for what you did and for saving the bus and the facility. The bus is actually back in service. They were able to repair it, get it back out there. And on behalf of VTLP, I have a little gift for you. They have sent you.
Meantime, I was taking a picture too.
So you each got a $50 Visa gift card. So they've heard this, but I don't know if I ever said to you, one of my many jobs in transit over a summer when I was a young guy, about same height, but a little thinner, was in maintenance. I interned in the maintenance department for almost 4 months. It was the hardest job that I ever have done in our industry. So you already have a hard job. That night was even harder. So thank you.
Did for 30 years, so.
Yeah, amazing. All right.
Thank you.
Something with the brakes. Just want to, Josh, before we move on, just want to say thank you to both of you for your contributions to Dash and for showing up. And, you know, we're proud of our safety record, and you both clearly showed that night you were part of it by preventing further damage to our facility and further damage to that vehicle. So thank you for all of you.
Thank you.
We allow time each board meeting for any members who serve on boards and commissions or have you know, news or announcements that would be beneficial for the group. Is there anyone who wishes to be recognized? We move on to the consideration of the meeting minutes for March that were included in our packet. Are there any revisions to the minutes as they were presented? If not, is there a motion to adopt?
Motion.
Moved by Art. Is there a second?
Second.
Good to reach. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
Hillary abstains. And we'll move into our financial review.
Sure. So as is usually the case, well, first of all, Edward, welcome back. Edward's back. He was out sick the last board meeting and we weren't able to talk about the financials, but he is here to give you a brief summary of sort of where we stand on our financials and answer any questions that you might have. I want to also sort of start out by recognizing he's going to talk a little bit of a projected deficit that we're working to get a handle on. And we're implementing some actions within the next week or so to try to help right size that. But many of those are coming as a result of maintenance costs. And those maintenance costs are attributable to the electric buses that were out of service and had high dollar repairs. So we're trying to figure out what potential remedies there are. And obviously Edward and Kevin and the team will work very closely as the fiscal year rounds out to try to get that. But Edward, I'll let you say what you want to say to the team or at least answer any questions they have.
Thank you, members of the board. As mentioned, the financials are in the packet. We are currently projecting about a $200,000 deficit, which is within the 2% of being on budget, more or less. That takes into account the largest driver of the deficit is the maintenance costs. As Josh mentioned, that was a lot of trying to get our fleet back to operating levels. That has started to see results, as I mentioned in the board packet. We now our on-time performance is up, etc., as a result of these investments in maintenance. The projected year-end deficit, one, it assumes that everything is spent at 100%. So we are looking at pausing some travel, some training, things that we can put on hold. That also looks at a couple of capital investments like our non-revenue fleet. We have a car that's ordered we assume that that's paid for this fiscal year. These are some things that we're looking at possibly deferring to next fiscal year to address that deficit. Additionally, we are also very conservative on fuel, just knowing everything that's going on with the global situation. Happy to answer any questions.
And I would also just echo that. I mean, the fuel price situation is potentially a real challenge. The good news is that our pricing is kind of delayed in the sense of when prices skyrocket at the pumps. If they come back down in the window of time before we make our next fuel order, we're insulated some from that. And I would also mention, especially for our new board member and others, I think Kevin, you weren't on the board when we last talked about fuel, when fuel was an issue, is we have spent a lot of time in the past, and Edward has done a great job of really evaluating various options of acquiring fuel. At the end of the day, we've discovered that our method has really turned out to be a very cost-effective, if not the most cost-effective method of procuring it. There are some systems you think you determine that will do cooperative purchasing agreements or even hedging of fuel costs, which we backed away from because of our quasi-governmental status. So, you know, that's something that we continue to look at and try to figure out options with. But if fuel price spikes stay up for the next couple of months, that could compound the issue. So we're working as a team over the next week or so to figure out what levers we want to pull now and then have ready to pull in the future should things change. We want to come back with a balanced budget. You know, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to resolve the overages. And of course, for Edward and to talk with Kevin and the team about what he's seeing as actively as it comes in. As Kendall always said, please no surprises. Let's talk about it in advance. So that's what we want to do.
If I'm reading this right, are we finally actually beating projections on advertising revenue after several years of struggling with that?
We are the bulk. Well,
I guess it's like, was this a one-off or is this a model that's going to sustain going forward?
so some of this for this fiscal year is the catch up from the last vendor.
Okay.
We are seeing the current vendor picking up quite a bit. So for this fiscal year, it's a combination of the prior vendor and the new vendor.
I know we strive for a balanced budget every year, but do we have a reserve? Is there a fund balance that we can help support us in times when fuel costs are skyrocketing?
So our budget is I think 98% is in subsidy. That's pretty much what funds us. For multiple fiscal years, we were finally in a surplus, which was great. Looking back to when we had a deficit several fiscal years ago, we did have to go through the SA process.
And when I first got here, there was a small account set aside that was in some ways a reserve. But we dismantled that on the premise that it was set up by my predecessor and we recognized it was not a best practice appropriate approach. But I think down the road, if you and the team want to look with us at that and how we potentially start building something around that for the city. I'm not sure how it's been handled in the past. I think Kendall had probably looked citywide and sort of tried to balance out. And as Edward mentioned, I think the past couple of years we had some money that went back and that may have been used to balance others. But, you know, so however you feel is the appropriate way to best handle it, we can certainly work to set something up.
Well, the prior account, my recollection was kept off the books. That was something that was discovered, surreptitiously.
It was an outside of the city account, which was the problem. Although, you know, speaking of our structure, Dash is set up on the city's books, or the city's finance system. All of our sister systems have all those accounts separate, and they build reserves outside of the city process. Independently.
The board did not,
we don't do
the
that.
accounting system. So what the point I'm getting.
Well, and that was, yeah, that was.
The accounting system,
yeah,
which
yeah.
limited our ability to make decisions about budget.
That's right. Solved that one early on. So yeah, we'll keep you all updated.
And I guess then the question, and I can ask this during the FY27 budget, is what adjustments would be prudent about fuel, or do we feel comfortable with the assumptions we've made in that budget, given what we know is starting to happen and duration of higher costs?
So every fiscal year I do add in a little cushion for fuel, obviously. The war in Iran was not something that we foresaw, obviously. So for the FY 27 budget, we were a little conservative on fuel, but that does remain a risk.
Should we consider making then some adjustments to accounts where we have some discretion in order to put more towards fuel? You know, since we're still in the process of considering the budget.
It is something that I think Josh and I get to in backwards.
Okay, so we'll have a hearing next month on the budget, so we've got time to make those adjustments. There's something we can do given what we know of the current world affairs and circumstances. I'd love for us to at least take that opportunity so we don't start the year already knowing we're going to be in a. Strategic plan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as discussed previously, the strategic plan before you, which has been included in your boardable packet, is set forth and recognizes what was presented to you in the previous meeting. And I'll again restate that the plan is an update which preserves our core vision, mission, and values, and updates how we organize, measure, and track our work as an organization. There were some tweaks to some of the goals, but as a general rule, it centers on 5 core goals, which is system excellence, customer experience, environmental stewardship, workplace excellence, and fiscal responsibility and efficiency. What has been strengthened in this vision is the performance framework beneath those goals with clearer measures tied to ridership, customer experience, employee engagement, environmental performance, and cost effectiveness. The updated plan is intended to provide a more practical and accountable roadmap for Dash moving forward. And so with the board's approval this evening, the 2026 strategic plan will replace the prior 2024 plan and take effect immediately. Interestingly, we adopted the previous plan in April, so our timing is lining up. I would note that I think once we adopt this and we've really built out a lot of initiatives and strategies in this, we would probably take a look at this in the next 2 to 3 years as needed. So since this is the board's strategic plan and this differs from the Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan or ATSP, this is an action item for you to align with the goals and priorities of our operations as an organization.
Gosh, I did, we'll have some discussion. I did want to start out by saying you had mentioned this when you given an update that some of the measures were still under development. Now we know kind of which ones are still to come and a timeline for when those will be developed. I guess in looking at, I would prefer to vote on the plan in final after we have everything, because most of it's going to be done either end of June or end of September. I also understand that you and your team need clarity on what the goals are, and that board can certainly vote on that, but it would be my preference that the plan come back to us in final once all of those measures are there, so that way we are voting on everything and sort of not, then surprised at what was selected or if we have some disagreement over the target. Understanding it's a living document, we revisit it, but I think that for me, that would be a better process. And then I did have a question on couple of the measures. We talk about something called Rate Your Ride. Is that something you do in the transit app? I'm not familiar with Rate Your Ride.
So this is a new tool that we've rolled out. It is on the buses now as a QR code, and it asks, how did we do? And it's affixed a couple of places on the bus. And that takes the respondent directly to a very brief survey. It says 5 stars, you did great, or less than 5 stars. And then if there's less than 5 stars, we ask the question, what went wrong? How can we do better? And then we've set our target as a average of those responses. We plan as a part of our initiatives to continue rolling out how that is engaged with. So by setting the high level goal and the target and the tool, we can then do work around making the tool more visible, more people more aware of it, engaged more with our team. I think the previous measure was around a customer satisfaction index, which was a formula driven thing that took a lot of different factors into play and produced a result. But what we found was that that wasn't really practically getting at what is the true experience of our riders. And our concern was that it could tell us it's either too great or too bad, and we wouldn't have a true understanding or be able to follow up on what was going on.
Are we getting, and it hasn't been around long enough for us to know how often it's being used, Rate Your Ride? Are we getting?
Yes, we are getting responses. I don't quite know what the total number of responses are. Camilla, do you have a sense for what we're getting on average, maybe?
So we started, launched it in August of last year. I do have the numbers.
Okay. Do you, off the top of your head, is it?
It's between, I would say 50 per month.
I understand. I mean, if it's just a sign, people aren't
Yeah.
until you start to promote it, but because it does require, somebody has to have a smartphone to be able to do it, be comfortable kind of using that technology. I would suggest that if we're going to take some time developing other measures that we have, and that's fine to use, but I would suggest we have another alternate measure in there that is just encompassing more of our ridership. So for example, on like cleanliness, I think, yeah, assuming Dash has standards that say a bus leaves here, this is what a clean bus is. I mean, we could do a periodic spot check of buses on the road, you know, or at an endpoint to determine whether a bus is meeting that standard. You don't have to depend on your riders to tell you. Certainly, if what your riders are telling you differs from, you know, what we're finding in our standards, that would be interesting to know, and you need to kind of reconcile what the difference is. But I just feel like there are other ways to kind of get at that besides a, you know, particular survey that's available only if you have the equipment, you're able to do it, although it does sound like it's very easy and convenient way to provide feedback versus contact your customer service. Just things I would encourage you to think about as you finalize your measures.
For sure. I mean, the thing I would sort of clarify, and I know it's been a couple of years since we talked about this, there are a robust set of initiatives that are built out that get exactly at what you're talking about that happen internally. The purpose of the strategic plan was to set the high level goals and the outcomes, and for the board to be looking to those to inform them of the process. So we're gonna do, I think, a lot of what you're talking about, but that more granular level of detail is not something that we previously or would normally bring to the board. Instead, we would report back over time, right, of the effect of initiatives, right, on those goals, as opposed to going into the minutia of exactly what was done within the initiative to accomplish it. It's an altitude kind of question, right? And the more granular you get, it would pull the board potentially into a lot more detail than is really gonna help you to govern in sense, right? It's not to say we won't do it. It's just to say that it's not included in this report for that reason, because this is specifically just the board's altitude piece. There's a whole nother set of plans that happens underneath of this that folds up into it.
That's helpful, but I do think that there are other measures that we can use to get at this plan that would bring in more of our right. If we want it entirely, you know, if we want cleanliness entirely and comfort entirely, you know, something that is a rider determination versus how those buses are meeting our internal standards. I just think that would be helpful to have there because it would also allow a broader, you know, bring in more of our ridership and bring in more opinions as opposed to somebody who may be motivated to take that survey and be somebody who has a really bad experience as opposed to this person who's like, oh, I got where I needed to go and I'll get where I need to go tomorrow. They may be less inclined to, you know.
Yeah, so maybe I just want to make sure understanding you correctly. So you're looking at goal 2.2, right?
Yeah.
The objective measure of 2.2.
Right,
So-
and I think you had it in you had another one for
Rate Your Ride.
Which I think was overall satisfaction.
Right, because so what we're doing in that situation is we're drilling down specifically to cleanliness, right? And asking the question of a clean fleet. Now, modern fleet, we have a whole set of initiatives around modern. That's how the bus is spec'd out and built, right? The USB ports, right, that are added for that matter example. So there's initiatives around that, and then the cleanliness of understanding how that is. Yeah, I mean, actually, we did have a conversation, right, around like, hey, we could try to evaluate how much the cleaners are doing, right? And then spot inspections of that and that kind of stuff. But what we got at was that rate your ride specific question around that would be our measure. But it would not be the sole driver of the initiatives that go into it. So there might be an initiative, for example, of the maintenance team will develop a checklist whereby John spot checks a certain number of buses each month, reports that back, determines, what's the impact, what's the success of that, and that rolls up into providing that modern clean fleet. But what he's doing is not asking our customer what it was like. So I think that's why we tuned in, but we can certainly take a deeper look at it, if that would be helpful. I think I also want to expand the reach. I get a little bit what you're getting at is how do you engage people who don't potentially have a smartphone?
Or don't see the sign.
Or don't see the sign, right? Or don't scan the code. And so I think that is well heard and makes sense because I think we have a responsibility on the initiative level to promote that tool and to find ways to then engage. But again, that's not something we would list out those individual initiatives to you all. But we can report back on sort of the what they are and the effect that they have.
I feel like, I mean, the spot checks that are done by the head of maintenance of the buses, I feel like that could be a useful tool to have just that piece of data because that helps us understand internally, do you have the right mechanisms in place to ensure that your cleaners are meeting those standards? So I feel like that could be as useful a piece of information to have from that plan. But I agree, I don't want to know everything that happens internally day to day. That's not our role, but I feel like that could be a way to get at whether we're actually measure whether we're actually providing fleet to our customers. So anyway, just that I'm happy to talk with you offline about that too.
Okay.
But, that was just my initial feedback. Others?
I've already had discussion. I was looking at under goal 4, workplace excellence. Yeah, recruit the best people. Why was there not a focus on retain as well? I know a lot of agencies are grappling with workforce issues where they're saying it's not easy to bring in new staff, but they're having a hard time as well once they bring them in, retaining the staff. So I'm kind of getting at, did the staff look at just recruiting or recruiting and retaining?
So I believe that the retaining falls under 4.3, which is the inclusion and belonging element. The minutia of the wording, I don't recall exactly why we didn't specifically call out retain. But this is much of this is built around our employee engagement survey and then subsequent plan that came out of that and is being developed. And so for an example, an initiative level element would be stay interviews, right? Which we're actually already doing.
Okay.
And we're rolling out a wider plan around that, which is to get a sense of how are you doing, right? What's your long-term goal? How do you want to be developed? Right, those kinds of things to tackle that. But I can certainly circle back with you and give you a little more detail as to why we didn't actually include retain in that.
It was wonderful.
Sure.
No biggie.
I like what I see here. I think the goals served at the right level. I really appreciate that we're looking for measurable metrics. Any substantive feedback on them, just to please us going forward.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you would like us to work from this as draft right now and assume minor edits based off the feedback that we talked about, but then to bring the plan back with the remaining targets that have identified dates before you approve the plan. The main reason I ask that is because if the plan is still in draft and changes, we're waiting on this to be like thumbs up and we're rolling out all this work around it. If we need to course correct, I think kind of what you brought up, I need to make sure we're getting at what you're talking about. We would want to make sure we do that now, as opposed to waiting until after the plan is adopted. probably doesn't matter all that much if we wait to adopt it.
I mean, would it be, I mean, I was thinking we could approve the plan so that way the goals are set with the understanding that it will come back so that we can review the remainder of the measures and then give
Yeah.
final approval. I just want to make sure that gives your team then the clarity that they need to
That's great.
go
Yeah.
forward. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to approve it and then your approval say it's conditional upon coming back in September with the finalized targets that have yet to be determined, that's fine.
So are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Like Jesse, I think it's a really solid document and I'd move approval.
It's been moved by Kevin, second Jesse, all in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, this is a report only item, so there's no action required, as you previously alluded, Mr. Chair. We are in the final stages of the proposed budget. So included in your packet is the FY 2027 General Manager's proposed budget. Just a quick summary is that it totals 38.3 million and reflects a 2.7% increase over the current year. The proposal is focused on maintaining our existing service levels and continues funding for the Line 32 enhancement that was implemented in the fall of 25. So that is changed since the draft that was submitted to you and since this has gone through the city manager's process. Primary cost pressures in this budget are wage and step increases on the collective bargaining agreement. I will call out the fact that the collective bargaining agreement raises our costs more than 2.7%. And so the remaining percentage of that was pulled out of other programs that we had it planned around scheduling, run cutting, and other things that the workforce had asked for in regards to their working environment. And so that was a part of the negotiation process. We, as an organization, want those things to come back, and we'll be looking at how we get them back in the future. But considering the economic environment, it was not an option to send forward a larger increase to the city. Disappear. Okay. Still good. Anyway, so rising fleet maintenance and maintenance expenses are another major driver, and technology costs. Now something's happened. What's happening? My computer blipped out. Good. Ravina, you're still there? Good. Okay. They're increasingly shifting from one-time capital purchase to recurring operating costs. And then consistent with the funding guidance that we were given, the proposed budget does not include any additional service expansions, ATV expansion, or as previously mentioned, the operator work quality improvements. So again, no board action is required. The proposed budget will return next month for a public hearing. And of course, as the city's budget process moves through, if there is any other things that have changes that occur as a result of council directions, we would incorporate those and then be asking you all to approve the final budget in June.
Questions? Discussion for Jesse?
I think just the one thing that I think is worth noting, considering our previous discussion about our current year finances, we know we're running a little hot on fuel costs this year.
Yeah.
That is the big savings area in this budget for next year, right? We're $300,000 down. So I think just over the next 6 weeks or so, as we get this finalized, that feels like something worth paying attention to, whether we feel like that projection is still sustainable, or are we setting ourselves up to be chasing a deficit for most of next year?
I am very concerned that we'll be chasing a deficit next year.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, the team has worked very hard, and kudos to John and the maintenance team and their leadership in working to get through many of these large expenses this year that will not reoccur next fiscal year. So I don't anticipate maintenance having overspending in their budget again next year. But to your point, fuel could come in as a situation for us. And I think we'll need to talk May or June about the messaging around that, because there isn't an opportunity at this point for us to go back to city council and say, whoops, things changed. And I think the city's going to grapple with the same issue. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of conversation internally about later on in the fiscal year. And I think to your point, Jesse, I would just try to stay ahead of messaging with the manager's office that things are going to be rough. And so let's figure out what we're going to do to manage it throughout the course of the year. But thank you for raising that. It is something that I'm taking a little sleep over.
So I know we're all gonna be worried about fuel for a little while. Maybe not this year. I'm trying to think through, even with the small amount of electric buses we have in the fleet, is there a point in which we need to bring the same sophistication you all bring to fuel projection to utilities? And I know one of the things we're all generally worried about are some of the rate increases proposed by Dominion that directly impacts your ability to fuel those buses. I suspect it's not a huge cost driver yet because of how small a part of our fleet is that, but is there a point where we can start having that same level of sophistication of the discussion about that as we do for fuel? Or not? I don't know.
There
I'm
is.
asking the question.
I think there is, and I know Ray and the team are working hard on getting the charge management system in place. I think there was a setback on that, right, Ray, as far as the vendors and.
Yeah, we're just navigating through installation issues, just getting that online. We anticipate that system being online and starting to provide feedback to us as early as the beginning of this thing.
And also with the completion of the facility expansion, that'll all be built into that.
Yeah.
And when the fleet, I mean, by the time it's all said and done, we'll have another 20 or so electric buses in the fleet. So that may start to shift that, and that's a question Matt has often asked about over the years, and we've struggled to answer, and I agree that it's something I'd like to know more about. And I'm optimistic that this technology is gonna help us do that. But yeah, and I mean, I think the other thing to understand about raising fuel costs, which I think everyone talks about, is it's not just the fuel we put in the buses. It's everything that happens for the things to get to us. And so maintenance, supplies and costs are already sky high. We're already seeing, crazy numbers. And so all of that stuff is going to go up. So we will need to be very actively following that. We will do that in the next fiscal year.
Thank you, John.
I will continue, if it's okay, into summary of activities and community engagement. Once again, we've been super busy, so I have a lot to tell you about. Over the past month, Dash has been busy and visible, engaged in community outreach and partnership and education. We've launched a new commemorative bus and ceiling wraps, which you see here pictured. Ajayesha was able to stop by to our launch of the Kids First Years bus takeover, which is the bottom picture there. And what you see on the right is actually murals on the ceiling. And I hope this is a very original idea that Camilla and the team have worked to bring forward. And I think we're one of the few, if only in transit, that's doing it. So we're really proud of this program that the team has worked on. It's really driving a lot of engagement, a lot of excitement with our community partners. And the mayor was here to celebrate the launch of this bus. And we got NBC came out. They asked how often Adam Tuss is here, and I said he's never here. He's too obsessed with metros. What am I gonna say? We also hosted some student facility tours, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. And we began our public outreach for the FY27 ATSP, and there are some communications actually just went out today as well. So you'll be getting a lot of written feedback. I know Camilla and the team have been collecting that already and seeing strong responses. We're preparing for the CTAF State Bus Rodeo later this month. That's going to bring transit professionals from across Virginia to Alexandria and further showcase our leadership. In addition, we received some really positive media attention when we stepped in to support an emergency evacuation of the Silbury School. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The picture you see here is actually the first time that one of our buses has been used in an emergency situation and had cribs on it. And so this was a very dangerous situation for that daycare, and we were contacted, the team mobilized and sent one of our 60-foot buses out there, and we were able to help with the emergency response. Again, something that I'm really proud of the operations, the maintenance teams, and everybody else who jumped in to help with that. And then finally, we had the opportunity to host a youth facility tour for a group of students with a strong interest in transit history and mobility. Welcome them to our facility. And shared more about how Dash operates and gave them a chance to experience the ride on one of the 60-foot buses. As I mentioned previously, I got to welcome the group who were screaming and jumping around the lobby, and I was able to keep their attention for about 5 minutes. After which time I handed them over to Stephanie, who is better with kids, and she gave them a great tour and then told me I owed her after it was all said and done. But nonetheless, there we are in the lobby, and before all the screaming and well, in a moment of calm during all the screaming and excitement. But it's just really great to see the kids excited and have the opportunity to introduce future transit riders to what we do. On March 18th, we celebrated Transit Worker Appreciation Day by recognizing the hard work and dedication of our team throughout the entire day, including a wonderful fish dinner served by Nikki Henderson, who wasn't here earlier. Oh, there she is. So there's Nikki helping to serve. So thank you, Nikki, our HR manager, for stepping up, and Daisy Allman, I did not see here, helping to recognize our staff. A really important day and a great opportunity to thank our employees for the work they do. We also celebrated the retirement of Earl Jackson after 36 years of service. For those who don't know, I may have mentioned this previously, he pulled the first buses out of Dash in 1984 to go on the road, and he drove the first bus out of this facility when it opened in 2009. And as you can see there is a picture, he had a water cannon salute for his final bus pulling into the garage. So a great celebration of him. He was all smiles, and we really miss him. But yeah, I'm sure he's enjoying his retirement. He's on the far right there with Brian Roby, and he's holding his happy retirement Dash bus stop sign. Next, members of the Dash team traveled in March to California for a pre-production configuration audit at RIDE, which is formerly BYD. This is a part of our continued work to advance our zero emission fleet. The visit gave the team an opportunity to see firsthand how these buses are built and better understand how they perform compared to our current electric fleet. I will note that we do not have any buses from RIDE in our current fleet, and they are the only other electric manufacturer in the United States that we can acquire a bus from. However, side note, we are not permitted to purchase them with federal funds. So these are the only buses we can buy. We can only buy these buses assuming we are using local or state funds because of the origin of the manufacturer does not meet Buy America requirements. So it was a great visit. They got to see how they're built and perform compared to our current fleet. And while in California, they visited the Antelope Valley Transit Authority, who operates the nation's only fully electric bus fleet, all RIDE buses. And that visit gave them some valuable insight into how other agencies are implementing the technology in practice, including what has gone well, where the challenges remain, and what lessons we can apply here at Dash as we continue moving forward. So again, another really valuable, important piece of work for the team, Ray and John. There's John in the selfie, our selfie man who was sending them back to learn a lot. Yes, sir.
Do the RIDE buses work with our existing chargers, or would that be?
Yes, they will work with our universal chargers. The only chargers we have that are a real problem are the Proterra chargers. I don't think we know whether they'll work with those, but the new facility hopefully will be open, looking something similar to what you see in this picture, but with overhead chargers, where they will park underneath that and get charged.
I'm just curious because of our own very long discussion about Proterra and the performance after the bankruptcy. Did Antelope Valley have Proterras in their fleet, and how did they navigate that disruption? We were pulling all our Proterras off the road. How would they? Was that a factor for them? I mean,
No, they never have Proterras in their fleet. They have gone 100% with back then was BYD. The majority of the fleet have a number of MCL as well. Electric MCL, the vast majority of their local bus fleet is all BYD.
Okay.
BYD is the largest electric vehicle manufacturer, I believe, in the world. Not, I think, right?
It's up there.
Pretty close.
So if we purchased RIDE buses, or we're just going to, we went out there.
Purchased them, we've ordered them. Okay. Yeah. This is a pre-production meeting, so this is the confirmation that the spec of the buses is aligned with the same spec as the rest of our buses. And that their build standards and delivery expectations meet our requirements.
So are these the smart scale funded expansion buses?
Yes.
And how long has BYD been in production? Like, I know we were trying to diversify our fleet, having New Flyer and Proterra. why was this not a consideration before? Were they just not making electric buses when we were purchasing those?
I'll let Ray chime in and tell you a little bit about the history there.
Yeah, BYD has been making buses in North America for quite some time. We had not considered that an option because they have been using a different type of technology, AC technology, up until very recent.
Electric technology. They're also the only other manufacturer other than New Flyer that builds an articulated bus. And our fleet strategy is to buy as many articulated buses when possible. Right now, we're limited to New Flyer, where we've had a lot of trouble with their electrics. So BYD is another option to see on there.
We're optimistic that BYD is not gonna have the same type of issues that are, based on your visit with.
They have been talking with a lot of BYD owners and they seem to be happy with them.
We've been hearing a lot of positive feedback, so we have high hopes. How many buses in this order?
4 buses.
Yep.
Sorry, one more question. The new facility, is that with the articulated buses, are we set up or for that? Or is that gonna take up 2 spaces for one articulated bus? Or are we just gonna be?
So the articulated bus will need to take up 2 spaces, and they're configured in a way where they don't need to live in a space, they'll need to occupy 2 spaces to charge and then store elsewhere.
All right, the last item here is that we continue supporting the Dashing Words in Motion program. Historically, they've come and presented. They weren't able to do that this evening with the this year's winning poems, but they will be appearing on our fleet through August, and the poems have been included in your packets. So I'm really proud to continue supporting this program, and there were quite a few submissions. So there's a lot of engagement with this program. I just want to highlight a bunch of events coming up so that we make sure you're aware of where we're going to be and what we're doing. So starting with Saturday, April 11th, Dash will be at the EV Ride and Drive event. The 18th of April will be at the ALX Dog Walk. The 22nd of April will be at the Spring to Action Day Festival. The 25th, Saturday the 25th, again, that's the state rodeo. If you are interested in volunteering for that, we would love to have you. Please let Beth know so that she can register you as a judge. We do need a proper head count since this is a state rodeo. It's not, and it's a ticketed event. If you want to come as a guest, please let Beth know because we'll need to submit your information so that there's a proper head count for meals and you don't get turned away. There will be also a banquet in the evening at the host hotel, which I believe is the Embassy Suites. Is that right? So we're hopeful for a big turnout of that. This is the first time that Dash has hosted the combined paratransit and 35-foot bus rodeo. We don't operate paratransit buses. So Virginia Regional Transit is loaning us some of their body on chassis buses. Similar setup to the existing rodeo, but just the smaller vehicle with an added component of a wheelchair securement process, demonstrating individuals' ability to work with individuals with special needs. And then Monday, the 27th, will be at the ACHS softball game, and Tuesday, April 28th at the ACH baseball game. And we have another partnership with that, right? Camilla, you want to talk about what's going on with that? Because that was a big popular thing last year.
So we are doing the jerseys again. We're gonna have the bus there. We're gonna have table. So definitely kind of because of the success of last year, we're gonna do this year.
Some very cool jersey stuff. And I know that you want to talk about the
The soccer association.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're partnering with ASA and Visit Alexandria for the World Cup. So we're doing a jersey, we're gonna be doing a full draft. I know the team has been working on the shuttle opportunity. There's gonna be a lot of events, so we're gonna try to be present at as many events as we can. And just hopefully get the Croatia team to take a photo.
There you go.
I mean, I heard shuttle. Are they hiring us to be their charter service between the hotel and the Episcopal? Oh, that's fantastic. That's great.
That's the intent.
That's great.
Is the partnership again this year, is that for the baseball game or also the softball game or?
Yeah, both.
Both
Baseball, softball, and then soccer.
former softball player, I approve.
Any other sports we haven't covered? No, don't answer that question.
Gotta get on
Oh, that's right, with Dundee, yeah.
we get on the rugby cup.
Yeah, oh my gosh, here we go. Well, I was gonna say, stop it, Josh. Final report here for you is ridership continues to remain high. Again, continue to be excellent numbers. I did have to look since this chart doesn't actually have the specific number for October. It looks like we're higher than October from the previous year, but it's not the case. We're just a few riders shy. But again, the planning team is continuing to audit these numbers and work on our certification with NTD. So there may be some adjustments to these numbers in the future, but hopefully if those adjustments happen, they happen up. We'll cross our fingers. Steve is nodding her head, so fingers
We're
crossed.
very close to crossing the finish line with this.
And that's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Our next meeting is going to be at the Ely Library. We're going to have a public hearing on the budget, 5:30 p.m. May 13th. Is there any other business to come before the board tonight? Not, Matt, am I able to, you were telling me I could declare the meeting adjourned?
We
All right.
went through the entire agenda, we forgot.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Oh,
yes, yes.
Yes, please sign those.
But we just adjourned.
If anybody want to have.
Yeah, we don't listen to him anymore. Can't make me do it now.
The other thing.
Absolutely.
Oh, Mr. Chenk, Commission on Aging started.
Oh.
That. That's right.
Alexandria, the league softball has a
Oh, today?
It's the enrollment and history program.
Awesome. I'm very excited. I tried to get Alice into it,
Yeah.
but it, defense is